Right. So at the end of my lecture today, you should be able to know the different types of qualitative research designs and which ones will be most appropriate for your research. You will also know how to say which data collection methods to use, which is aligned with your research question. Can you see your research question now becomes more important because your research question is kind of predictive of what kind of research you should use. And then you will describe how your respondents will be sampled. And then, I don't know if I will be able to do the next 3 bullets that I will do in the next lecture, is how to do qualitative data analysis and how to structure and interpret your data that you analyze and how to ensure that your data is trustworthy and credible. Okay, so this is specifically for qualitative data collection. Now we have qualitative research designs, but first I want to make sure that you understand the difference between qualitative research and quantitative research. Now let us think, what does the word quantitative say to you? It says quantity. What does it mean to quantify something? It's an amount you counted. Okay, so it is number. Can you see I highlight the N there? It is because this talks about number. So it is quantitative data. All right. Quantitative data have all to do with numbers. Some of us must look and see whether we want to do qualitative data analysis. Now, qualitative in this case is where it is more linguistic. In other words, we look at words. So we are going to analyze the use of words, the kind of words that people are using, and from that we can get more rich data. In quantitative data, we ask a person a question, like you answer a monkey puzzle, and the person must choose one or 2 or 3 options. You give him a few options to choose from for each question that you're asking. So quantitative research, we use normally questionnaires. In qualitative data, we analyze the language. In other words, you can go to a company, collect all their information about a certain issue, and you can go and analyze and see what the company has said about that issue. Or you can observe it in a naturalistic way. In other words, you go and you sit with the people and you observe what they are doing and you write it down in your words, and then you analyze their actions that you have written down in words. So that is basically the difference between qualitative and quantitative research. Quantitative research, we already know what questions to ask and what do we want to achieve. In qualitative research, we want to explore and discover new things that we do not know. And that's basically the differences between the two. Right. You will also see there, your qualitative approach is more exploratory. In other words, we look into the unknown, and we also have in our qualitative approach descriptive research. Describe exactly what is happening in a certain situation. We have 5 qualitative research designs. The first one is narrative studies. Then we've got phenomenology, and that's a difficult word. Try to pronounce it. It's quite difficult. Yeah, you see, now I'm getting stuck into it. phenomenology. Then we have also grounded theory. We have ethnographic, and then we have case studies. I know some of you have already in your title the word, it's a case study, but then we really need to go and make sure that you are for sure going to do a case study. So your topic of title already give you an indication that if you have a case study, that you should seriously consider whether you are going to do qualitative research and not quantitative research. Right. Let's look into the details of it. So after 5 qualitative research designs, our first one is narrative research. Now, narrative research is what people have talked, what is discussed and what is being said. The focus of this research is to explore the life of an individual or a group of individuals. We can collect the data by means of interviews or by means of documents. When we need to analyze this data, we need to go and look at stories. What is a narrative? It's a person's story. So you collect his whole life story, for instance, you're going to analyze it. Or you go and look into the history of a particular group of people. So this provides you then with a detailed picture of the situation or the person. Right. As far as I can gather, none of you are going to do narrative research because you are not going to analyze somebody's life story. You will see here the focus is on an individual and its life story. Especially in PR, we are doing a lot of qualitative research. I will come back to narrative research again. Then we look at phenomenology, which most of you will do phenomenology or case study. In phenomenology, we try to understand the essence of an experience about a phenomenon. What on earth does the word phenomenon mean? Who can help me out? Sorry? A perspective, it could be, yeah. Somebody else who want to try. Sorry, yes sir? Difficult word, no. Try to explain it. Sorry? It could be a philosophy as well, yeah. Don't think too big, think smaller. Sorry?
Phenomenon is a particular subject.
It's a particular subject. Very good. We're getting closer. Apart from it's a particular subject, it can also be a particular event or something that happens. The phenomenon of rain. It is something that happens. Okay. So that is what a phenomenon means. It is something that presents itself. Okay. So it could virtually be a lot of things. Do you hear what I'm saying? The phenomenon of the SONA. Do you all know what is a SONA? It's the State of the Nations. State of the Nation address, yeah. State of the Nation address, nah. So that is a phenomenon. It's a certain thing that an event and happening and so on. So anything can basically be a phenomenon. Okay. Right. So what we do in this kind of research, we want to understand exactly what people experience during such a phenomenon. Now, how do we collect the data for this? Is by long interviews, and we're using up to 10 people that we interview. Then we analyze the data, we look at the statements, the things that they are saying, and from that statement, we identified themes which describe this person's experience in a particular situation. Also, he described the essence of their experience. Another thing that type of qualitative research that we can do is grounded theory. None of you are going to do that. It is more specifically reserved for doing your PhD studies or your doctoral studies. That is where you as a researcher will develop a theory which is grounded in the data from the field. So it is unlike Maslow. We know Maslow got a theory. Do you all know that Maslow have a theory? Yes, with the different layers. Now, that is a fixed and sound theory. We all know what Maslow is all about, and we know how his theory is standing. So what we can do is we can take a questionnaire and we can simply answer the questions based on the 5 sections of Maslow's 5 levels or 6 levels. Can you hear the difference? While here in grounded theory, we don't know what is the theory. We need to go and discover that theory. Now your BTEC year is too short, Master's also too short, so that is why it is more reserved for your doctoral studies. Here we do interviews with 10 to 20 people until we have data saturation or saturated data. I will explain that later on. We analyze this kind of data by means of open coding, Excel coding, and selective coding. And the outcome of this research is to develop a new theory similar to Maslow's theory or our communication theory, etc. There's a whole lot of theories. Then ethnographic is the next type of research. Ethnographics research focus on describing and interpreting the culture of a particular group of people or a social group and their social interactions. And as far as I can remember, none of you have a title that specifically look into different cultural behaviors. Why not? We are not in the social sciences where we can go in sociology, where we can go and discover this kind of data. In PR, we are focusing a lot on our different communications and how we communicate and so on. But this research, how would we collect the data? By means of observation. So in a cultural study, you will go and observe these people in their cultural setting. You can also do interviews. You can take artifacts, and you will do it over the long term. What does the word artifacts mean? What is an artifact? No, I'm asking all the difficult questions today. You think you know it, but when you need to start defining, it's difficult. No. Yes. It's an item or it's an object. So I want to say kind of the sauna is an artifact that belonged to the South African public. Can you see that is a good example of a PR artifact. Normally we use artifacts in art. In other words, a sculpture or a historic piece that they discovered or in historian research and so on. But a selection of documents that you obtain from a company about a lot of issues can also be an artifact. Okay. Sometimes video recordings and audio recordings can also be classified as an artifact. Okay. Right. So with ethnographic, we can analyze the data by discussion analysis, and then we interpret and interpretive data analysis, where we describe the cultural behavior. So none of you are going to do this research. Then we have case studies. What is a case study? It develops an in-depth understanding of a single case or multiple, more than one cases. What we do there to collect our data is we have documents or records or interviews or observations that we can do, or various artifacts that we can use in a case study. The data analysis for a case study can include descriptions from which we derive themes and assertions. In other words, the outcome of a case study is an in-depth description of a case or a group of cases that are quite similar. Okay, right. Just to summarize then, we have 5 different qualitative research designs, and we are going to focus on phenomenology and case study. So the rest of my discussion will go more into detail and in depth in these 2 types. Right, let's go to phenomenology. That is basically a lived world experiences in everyday situations. Here we focus on the meaning of the lived experiences and the participants' understanding of it. In other words, if we think of the recent case of listeriosis, we can go and do interviews with people and ask them how do they feel, how did it happens with them, how did they live through the whole situation, how were they admitted to hospital and so on. So we can get an in-depth story about listeriosis and how people go about it. So then we focus on the experiences that they have, because we don't really know what a person experiences currently in South Africa if you've got listeriosis. How scared are you if you are going to attain that illness, eh? It changed a lot. Before we didn't even know about listeriosis. Can you hear? So listeriosis is basically just an upset stomach, for those of you who do not study in hospitality. So it's food poisoning. Okay. So we basically in lay terms call it food poisoning. This is just a certain type of food poisoning. We know already a lot about food poisoning and what people go through, so we can do questionnaires on food poisoning and so on. But in this case, if we really want to investigate the lived experiences of people, then we have to go and either interview them, having focus groups with them, or have some observations of people who are ill with this illness. Do you get the idea of how you can study the same topic but with a different focus? Okay, and that will also help you to understand then how to get to your title, because the topic is about listeriosis, but the moment we go and make it qualitative research, our title will be quite different from when we make it quantitative research. All right. The important thing in phenomenology is that the researcher should set aside your personal biasness, your personal subjective opinions. Okay. Bias, the word bias means I'm subjective. In other words, my opinions influence my thinking around it. Okay. So me coming from a hospitality background, if I'm just using hospitality examples in this class, I'm biased. Do you agree with me? Then I'm subjective. If I'm using PR and tourism examples, then I'm more objective. Okay. So in qualitative research, we need to be really careful that our opinions about this research doesn't influence me. Okay, so if you are going to do an interview with a person, your personal biases and your personal political viewpoints should not influence that person. So you have to set your questions in such a way that you do not influence the people. You want to know what they think, not what you know. Okay. In this kind of research, we are describing what all the participants have in common as they experience the phenomenon, whether it's listeriosis or the sona or whatever. In this research, we ask the question, what has happened and how they experience it and what they experience in this particular event or incident or phenomenon. The method that we follow is we need to identify the phenomenon. That's not difficult. You already have your topic, so you know the phenomenon already. You will reflect on essential themes. As soon as you start going to the library and you look into a particular phenomenon, you will see there are certain main issues that always happen in certain circumstances. So those becomes your essential themes. And then we will write a description and interpret the meaning of that description. So basically what happened in a phenomenological study is we have interviews or we have focus groups. We record what the people are telling you after we ask them questions, and then we write it down, pages and pages and pages of information. And then we start reading that information to start making sense out of that information. So when you are doing qualitative research, you will go and do a lot of reading, and from a piece of paper that you've written a lot of comments that people made to you, whether it was from interviews or whether it's a lot of documents that you collect, you will start reading through it and discover patterns in that documents or in that interviews or in that video recording. While in a questionnaire, which is quantitative work, you simply dish it out and people answer for you questions. No. And you select what their answers might be. So if they have their own opinion, you don't have space for their own opinion. Okay. So this is more to determine people's opinions about things. Okay. Any questions? All happy? All right. Then we come to case study research. Case study research is an empirical inquiry about a contemporary phenomenon. Example like case. Contemporary means it's happening currently now. Set within a real world context. In other words, it's happening right now. Things like bullying in schools, it's happening right now. Things like listeriosis is happening right now. Okay. So can you see, now I'm getting you confused, because we can either use phenomenology, or we can use a case study in the listeriosis example. We as researchers need to go and sit and make our choices on that. Now, it is especially when the boundaries between the phenomenon and the context are not clearly evident. We do a case study if we do not really know where this problem comes from in this area or this particular group of people. So, we can ask the question, in South Africa, why is only VUT students toying about the NEFSA's bursary? Can you see? The other institutions do not. Can you see it's particular to the context? And it is a particular phenomenon that happened. They are unhappy about the bursaries. Do you see what is the phenomenon and what is the context? It's happening here at VUT specifically. Okay. unfortunately, with the NEFSA's bursary, it's happening all over the country, so it's not a good example to use. But say, for instance, it's happening just with a BTech PR student something, and they've got a particular issue here at VUT. Can you see? We don't know where it comes from, and we can ask the question, but why not at UP? Why not at the UCTs? Why only here at VUT? Then it becomes a case study. So do you get an idea where to go with your case study? Right. So I'm going to read it again. It's an empirical inquiry. Next difficult word. What does the word empirical means? Ever heard of it? Okay. Research we do in two ways. We do it in a theoretical way and an empirical way. Okay. So now you have to get your bearings together, right? We have qualitative research, we have quantitative research. Those two are approaches to research. Okay. Quantitative have certain designs. Qualitative have certain designs. Okay. Now within research as a whole, we can do when we do research, we have to have both components, theoretical and empirical, together to make it research. Okay. Theoretical is you go to the library, you do an assignment for your lecturer, you just get all the theory information. When you do empirical work, it's where you are going to go into the field and do field work. Okay. So the empirical inquiry is your practical inquiry. We are going to listen to the opinions of the people in the field, look at the specific documents and so on. So you take some of the primary data. What does primary mean? First, no. Secondary data is all data that somebody have written up. No. So if you write down the opinions of people and analyze it and come to your conclusions, that becomes secondary data. Okay. Because it's no longer that person's opinion, it's now your opinion of that person. Can you see that is secondary? So, research consists of empirical inquiry and a theoretical inquiry. Theoretical, you hop to the library, you get all the background information, which is all secondary data. The only primary data in your project will be the field work that you are going to do. Those questionnaires that you dish out, that interviews, that focus groups, that documents that you collect, that makes it an empirical inquiry. All clear on that word? Right. An empirical inquiry about a contemporary phenomenon or a case set within a real-world context, especially when boundaries between the phenomenon and the context are not clear and evident. So that's a definition of case study research. So if you've got case study in your title, make sure that this is what you are going to do. Then, a case is generally a person or an organization or a behavioral condition or an event or another social phenomenon. But the boundary between the case and its contextual condition may be blurred. Again, a PR experience, we don't really know all the ins and outs of Facebook and the impact that it has on people's behavior. So the phenomenon of Facebook and people's behavior can fit into a particular case. If you want to investigate the case of the lady who's selling the properties who make nasty remarks on her Facebook page, that will be then a particular case study if you investigate that. In case study research, we look at the how and the why questions. How it happened, why it happened, and so on. How did it come about? How do people feel about it, etc. Now, case studies become more interesting. We can divide case study research into 3 different types. We can have exploratory case studies where we explore. What does a person do with explore? They go and look at things that other people haven't looked before. Nah. Our early explorers, what do? They come to different countries and so on. You go and explore a foreign country or a new place and so on. So it's unfamiliar for you. Then we have the so exploratory case study research. Explore those situations in which the intervention being evaluated has no clear or single set of outcomes. Then we can also have a descriptive case study research. You will pick up the word descriptive again in quantitative research. We also have descriptive quantitative surveys. Okay. We can also have a qualitative descriptive case study. In other words, we attempt not to explore what happens, but we want to describe exactly what happens. So, descriptive research describe an intervention or a phenomenon and the real life context in which it occurred. Then we can also explain what happened, and that becomes explanatory research. So we explain the presumed causal links in real life interventions that are too complicated to just do a survey or an experiment. We need to really go and talk and explain what happened. So in our case of the NEFSA's bursaries and the VUT students only, I think we need to go and look at explanatory. We want to explain what happened in this particular case. Okay. Not so seared to describe what happens. We want to explain why it happened only at VUT. Do you hear the difference? Maybe if we have different cases at certain universities, maybe this just evolve at the different UOTs and not the traditional universities. We can then have, we can explore what is the differences between traditional universities and VUT and this particular case. Or we can merely just go and do a research and describe what happens to it. Questions on up till now? Yes, ma'am.
So
yes.
You have to only have one. Can't you have all three?
No.
Where you describe.
Yes.
Then after describing, you explore why there's a why it's. Okay, you spoke about traditional and
yeah.
Like
yeah. Yeah.
Where you describe what's happening, then you explain why it's happening, then you explore the reason why it happened. Can't you have all of those into one case study?
You can have all of it in combination. That is what you are going to do within your research, but that is not your total all over design. Ah, great. Good question. You see, and that is important in research. You will sometimes see, gee whiz, but now I'm lost. I don't know where to go with this. And that is why you now have your assignment 1 with your title and your topic and your problem statement. So you can ask now questions like this in a class and say, you need to wonder now, which one of these am I going to do? Okay. Even if you are not going to do it now, you need to know this basic information when you come and do your master's degree and so on. Maybe you think, yes, I'm going to do an exploratory case study. You rock up at your mentor's office and that one say, no, this is descriptive. Okay. So we need to concentrate on all these and have a background on how to do some of these basic research things. So maybe you will sit and say, I've got 2. They are very close. I really don't know what is the difference. Then you go and read a little bit on it. You go to your mentor and say, listen, I don't know. Is this now exploratory or is this now descriptive? And that I can help you with. Because now you come with a real problem to them and they say, let's read carefully, think about this. it rather goes to this way or that way. So in exploratory study, you are going to describe and you are going to explain, but that's not the core issue of your research. Okay. I know when I did, for instance, my PhD, I battled until the last day. Did I do a phenomenology? Was my study a qualitative phenomenological study? Or was it something different? Okay. And then within that, there are also more than one section. So you have to sit and wonder about these things. Okay. Any other questions? Right. Let's continue with case studies. We can also have multiple case studies where it's collective. We enable the researcher to explore differences between the cases. The goal is to replicate findings across the cases. So think of it as the VUT and the TUT. We can take the two cases and compare them with one another. So then multiple case makes sense. Okay. If you don't want to compare two places, then you just do the one place. Okay. So if you want to, in PR again, local radio stations versus national radio stations, and you want to look at their program content, you can do comparison between those. Then intrinsic is intended to better understand the case. It is not undertaken primarily because the case represents other cases or because it illustrates a particular trait or problem, but because in all its particularly ordinaries, the case of itself is of interest. In other words, it's a single case that happened just once. Okay. Then we have instrumental case studies used to provide insight into an issue or helps us to refine a theory. So none of us are going to do instrumental case studies. That will be more for doctoral students because we have this theory and we want to refine this theory. We don't know enough about it. Okay. So those students will need to go and look carefully. Do I do a grounded theory study or do I do an instrumental case study? So it's kind of difficult and there are some gray areas in here. Okay. The important thing in case study research is that you define the case that you are studying and you have to find extreme or unique cases. If it's just in general because you are studying one institution, it does not make it a case study. Okay. A case study is when we don't know the difference between the context in which it happens. Okay. And in the previous slide, the context between that phenomenon, that is what we need to discover, not just because it's one institution. Because I select one institution does not make it a case study. Okay. So sometimes you can have cases where you can use a questionnaire. But when we want to investigate particular things that we do not know in this case, then it becomes a true case study. Questions? I think some of you who've got the case studies would really go and look again and see, do you have really a case where there's something that happens that just happened in that particular setting or that particular point of time or in that particular happenings. Good example is also the day that Nelson Mandela passed away. People's opinions change from the previous day to the next day because a big event have happened. Okay, then it becomes a case study because the context have changed. Okay, right. So if, like for instance, excellent example, while I'm thinking of it, the sonar from Zuma and the sonar from Cyril Ramaphosa and how the people react on it. Because Cyril Ramaphosa becomes the new president, you will see that people look with different eyes because the context have changed. So you can go and analyze the SONA as a case study, the case of the 2018 SONA, because that was so particularly different from the previous how many years of Zuma's reign. Okay, do you understand that? Okay, you get the idea. Okay, sure, I need to get the tourism example here. But I believe that's for Dr. Berger. Okay. Now we know that there are two approaches to research, quantitative and qualitative. In qualitative, we get 5 types of research. So after you've decided, is it a case study or phenomenology that you are going to do, then you have to go and select the sample of people who you want to interview, whom you want to do a focus group with, or the sample of documents. So if you are going to investigate the SONA, what other documents apart from the SONA are you going to investigate with it? You cannot just investigate the SONA, okay? You have to have other surrounding documents with it. So, we need to come up with a sample. At VUT, we have 20,000 students. So if we want to find out something from VUT students, we could go the route and give all 20,000 students the questionnaire. No. Hey, how long is it going to take you to have all the students to complete it? Very long. Will you be able to do it in this year? No. So, from our total population, which is the VUT students, we need to come up with a smaller sample that we can handle within this year. Okay. And that means that is your sample. Those 20 or 50 or 100 or 500 students that you are going to select. That's your sample. The way that you are selecting them, we call sampling. So there it stands on the slide. The sample is your entities. It can be the persons, it can be the documents, it can be the artifacts, it can be the questionnaires that people fill in. That's, or samples. Blood that you draw is also samples. And sampling is the process of how you select these 10, 20, 40, 50, 500, 2,000 people. Okay. When we are doing, during the elections, you have heard that I predict that this party will win with 80%. Okay. Or this party will get 60% of the votes. That company doing the research cannot get all the people in South Africa and all their opinions, because then you might as well have the election, So what they do is they put certain criteria in place to select a few. They base that stats on about 2,000 people in South Africa. So only 2,000 people will be used as a sample to predict what the results of the elections will be. Very interesting, But we need to do our sampling correct. When you're going to do questionnaires, and in next semester we will do quantitative sampling, which is quite different from qualitative studies samples. Okay. Right. Your sample is the key to excellent qualitative research, and it also helps you to achieve data saturation. Do you know what something means when it's saturated? It's full. No, you can't add more in it. No. So we can get enough people to give us their opinions up till the time that we get no more new opinions. So if you are going to do interviews and you interview a person, with certain open-ended questions, and you interview 5 people and all 5 give you the same answer and nobody tells you something new, just even a tiny little bit, you have to go on until you hear no new stories from people. Okay, so that is how you work with interviews, you work with focus groups. When you collect also documents from companies, you also have to achieve data saturation. There should be no more new data that you can add. Okay, so for me to say, if you are going to do a qualitative study and you want to interview, and I will say to you, start with 5 people. You come back and you say, no, but everybody is telling me new stories. You have to go and interview number 6. And if you have another new story there, you must go to 7. And if 8 and 9 give all the previous stories and nothing new, you can stop. Then your sample will be 9. So those of you who are going to do qualitative studies will have difficulties to say now how big your sample will be. So you can say, I will start with 5 interviews and continue until data saturation have been reached. Okay, so it means you leave a door open, you're not specific. While in quantitative research, where we use a questionnaire, we need to determine that amount beforehand. Are we going to do 10 or 100 or 500 or 2,000 people? Okay, Dr. Berger will explain that for you, so it's not my job today to do it. So there it stands. No new information or concepts is found. Then you can stop interviewing people, stop collecting documents about an issue. What is the objective of this sampling? Is to extract thick, rich data to identify concepts, categories, and themes. Okay, now you wonder, what is a concept? What is a category? And what is a theme? Okay, that's what you need to achieve at the end of the day. When I'm going to do the chapter on data analysis of qualitative work, I will explain this for you clearly. You first have to go and collect the data and then say, ma'am, what do I do now with this pages and pages of written out work? You're going to read, you go to identify concepts. A concept is just a word. You identify certain words and then you group these words together, so you categorize it. And different categories can become a theme. Okay, so it should not be too difficult to analyze qualitative data. The trick here is students who's going to do questionnaires have to go and do 100 questionnaires or 50 questionnaires, while students who's going to do interviews need to do 5 interviews. Okay, so we all go and do interviews. It's only 5. Nice. Yeah. Until we come to read your interviews, which is interviews of half an hour each. So you have half an hour's words written out on a page, and now you have to analyze it. Then I just get back at you, and you have to sit for hours to analyze that. While the students who's doing questionnaires, click, 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 bling, bling, in the computer, on an Excel spreadsheet, and off you go. Okay, the computer do your calculation. So, you don't choose whether you are going to do a qualitative study or a quantitative study based on the amount of work, okay? Does not work like that. The amount of work going into it is equal. It's just at different phases you do something different, okay? So don't think, no, I'm going to take the easy way out, a questionnaire. Hey, you have to design your questionnaire. If you don't do your questionnaire properly, it will not work, okay? So, because you need to obtain data. Right. In qualitative studies, come back to the sampling, there are no rules for the sample size. I have seen a colleague of mine who have interviewed 2 people and did a whole D on 2 people. So the sample was 2 persons. While other people, I've done also a qualitative study with my PhD, I had about 56 participants in my study. Dr. Berger, for instance, I think she worked with 500 questionnaires or 800 questionnaires that she needs to dish out. Okay, so can you see there can be vast differences between them. Now, in qualitative research, we normally work with about 6 to 60 individuals, so it will be 6 to 60 interviews. Please, we will not do 60 interviews, you will not have time to do it, okay. So we will talk to each of you individually, and you can ask if you are not sure, but you measure it based on your data saturation. So you start out with six interviews until data saturation. Okay. All right. Select more participants than required, as you will not know when data saturation is reached. Then we can use different sampling techniques. Okay. There are different ways to get to your sample. Now the first one is purposive sampling. Can you hear the core word? Purpose. We select to include these people in our study because they serve a particular purpose. Okay. So we call that purposive sampling. It means if our study is about VUT students, they are there, we study this for a purpose, so we will purposefully select them because they meet our purpose of our study. Okay. So we cannot go and select other university students. So what is the definition of purposive sampling? Members are chosen with a purpose to represent a particular phenomenon, a group, an incident, a location, or type in relation with the key criterion. For the purpose of doing the listeriosis project, if you want to understand what people go through when they have listeriosis, the purpose must be that they must have that illness. Can you see? So you choose them because for that particular purpose. Right. Now there are 6 criteria for purposive sampling. The sampling strategy should be relevant to your research question. Again, can you see? If you don't know your research question, you will not be able to know how to do your sampling. Hey, yeah. Your research question will help you to decide what question. We will do it also in the practical class when you come one by one. Can you remember in Dr. Berger have done it in your proposal? You need to write down the sampling. So here is the question. Your research question will help us to guide us for the sampling strategy. Okay. The sample should generate rich information about the phenomenon. In other words, it must tell us enough about it for a BTech, okay, or enough to obtain a master's degree. That is rich description. It should describe all the issues about this. Then the sample should enhance the transferability of the findings. In other words, can we transfer it and do the same thing in another study, come up with similar results? Don't worry too much about transferability. In the, my next lecture, I will explain to you how would you go about to see that your work is transferable. Okay. Then this next one, the sample should produce credible descriptions. When is a person credible? When you tell the truth. Okay. So you need to get information that is really representative of what is really happening. What is the truth of what is happening? You will see when you are going to do field work, you get the feeling that people are lying to you. Nah? Yeah, I think some of you have already experienced that. Nah? Are your research then truthful? No. If your respondents are lying, so what we need to do is we need to design our questionnaires or the questions or the interviews in such a way that people will feel at ease and they will tell us the truth. Okay. So take an black Nigerian guy and go and send him into a white suburb in Joburg and ask him to knock on the doors, and people need to open the doors and tell him or complete a questionnaire. Do you think that will happen? Hey, 20 out of the not of all the tries that you will have. No, it is because there is no trust relationship. So when you are going to do research, make sure you as a researcher have a certain trust relationship with the people. It's like me with my white skin going to, and it happened to me in Eatonside doing research. The people start screaming at me and say, when are you going to give us jobs? Okay. So you see, people have perceptions. We as researchers, when we plan our research, we need to work around this. Okay. You are a student. You're low on the food chain. Eh? You cannot go and interview our president. Eh? He's not going to allow you to interview him. Eh? So think of it, because it is a trust relationship. No, it's a position relationship. You need to take these things into consideration in your studies. You need to think about it. But it should not be like that to make you biased or your research biased. And if it will hamper that you can tell the truth, then we need to find another way or another method to obtain the data that we need. Okay. So a lot of things that one need to think of when we are doing research. Okay. Then, and that linked to what I've just said, take ethical preconditions into consideration. If you want to do an interview with a person, nice, you have your cell phone out, you will summer tape them. Remember, what does the law say? We need to ask permission to record somebody. No. So, consent means you have to get the permission. I cannot just rock up in an informal settlement and say to this, or at the school and say, I'm going to draw blood of all of your students. Huh? They are small children. Huh? Their parents have to give consent. Okay, so I cannot just go there and do it. And going into schools is even worse. The Department of Basic Education need to give permission. Then the headmaster need to give permission. Then the parents need to give permission. Then the student or that small child itself need to give you permission to do it. So can you see? It gets into a technical nightmare doing that kind of research. Trust me, we have done it in our department. I've got currently a master's student who have to go all the way to get all these consent and all these permissions. It takes sometimes years to do it. Okay, so please, if I'm saying stay out of the schools, that's the reason why. Eh? We always have to be ethical. The ethical issues are not very well addressed in research, and as early as 1940, scientists get away with horrible things that they did to people in the way of how they are doing research. And then they come up with various ethical procedures and so on. But I'm not going to stand still today on what ethics we should take into consideration. That will be another lecture. Okay, but keep in the back of your mind, nah? Do to other people that you want them to do unto you. So that is the short and sweet of it. Can you imagine you're a doctor and you want to find out what is in somebody's brains and you want to see a live brain, so just cut them open? Hey, not going to fly, eh? Okay. So, horrible, horrible, horrible stories have happened in the past. Then also, and I think you've all get this idea already, you should take into consideration, is your project feasible? Is it doable? Especially in terms of money, time, and accessibility. And I've explained those all already for you in this lecture. Okay. Then, remember, the previous slide was the criteria for purpose of sampling. There are also then, let's go down, 8 types of purposive sampling. Okay, make it even more difficult. So now you have your research approach, you have a certain research design within that approach, then you have different sample selection ways, and each of these different ways have different ways within it. So you have to think. Remember that paper that I hand out to you? With the proposal, you need to think. The first one, type of sample, can be homogeneous. So it means you choose people with the same characteristics. They are all first-year students at VUT. Do you hear? They are first years, same university. If they are all humanities students, the engineer students might be different, depends on what we want to test. Now, if we want to test the math skills, social science students or humanities students' math skills will be quite different from the engineering students. Can you see? Then they are no longer a homogeneous group. Then they are heterogeneous. So it means, so the same group can be at the same time homogeneous or heterogeneous. You have to go and look again at your research question what you want to determine. Then we can also have purposive sampling, extreme case. It is very unusual, happens just in this extreme case. There is special conditions, like for instance, when with the listeriosis, they look at a particular school in Soweto where 9 of the children becomes ill, and from there they could trace it back. So that sample was an extreme purposive sampling. Okay, can you see? Because I test their blood for the bacteria in the blood. So it will be very extreme. Then intensity, it is not usual, but it's strongly representative in that particular phenomenon. PHE stands for phenomenon. A typical case can be, you find it typically under the elderly or under children and so on, or teenagers. Nah? Pop music or whatever, or the use of certain social media types will be more typical in a certain group. Then we can also have stratified purposive sampling. Dr. Berger will go more into detail on how to stratify your sample, so I don't want to stand still too much on that today. Then we can have critical case or vital case, pivotal, intensity and pivotal, can you see it gets very close, so we have to go and make a particular decision which one of the two it would be. And then we can also have theoretical purposive sampling, which we are using in grounded theory, so you don't have to worry about that one. Now, apart that we select people for a particular purpose, we can also select them for our convenience. Okay. Tourism is an example. If you are going to a tourist attraction, say for instance the Kruger National Park, and you want to have the opinions of the people and how they feel about the different campsites within the national park, you can stand outside Kruger Gate, and as the people come out, you can just select them. Okay. And we call that convenience because it's our convenience that we find them. Now, it's for me convenient to go there. So now I don't have to arrange with the park manager and all the different camp managers and etc., etc. Can you see when it becomes your convenient? For your convenience, for the researcher's convenience. If you want to find out something about people in a shopping mall and you stand at the door of the shop, and as people come out, it is also convenient for you. Okay, that's convenience sampling. It's not, and I know you've heard the word simple random sampling. Yes, they pop up at random, but it's not random sampling. Okay, so they pop up at your convenience. Say for instance you go to Pick n Pay on a, lately, yeah, who's the biggest customer of this Pick n Pay hypermarket around the corner? The NEFSA students, nah. So, will you get on Tuesdays, who's going there? All the old people, eh? So, if you select the people to complete your questionnaire on a Tuesday, then all the old people are going there. All the other days of the week it will be students. What happened to the rest of the general public? Where are they? Did they move to other shops? You are going to miss them in your sample. Your sample will no longer be representative. Okay. So you see, you need to think, which days am I going? What time of the day am I going? And so forth. Okay. Right. So convenience sampling, you happen to accidentally bump into that person who are prepared to complete your questionnaire or to do an interview with you. Then opportunistic sampling is when you have unforeseen opportunities that provide you with an opportunity for a person to complete your questionnaire. We can also have volunteered sampling. I more use it in the medical field, where they specifically want to test people who've got a certain illness and they want to test certain medicine on them. So you have to volunteer and say, I will take that medicine irregardless of the negative effects that it might have. Can you see? Kind of, I volunteer. But then to be ethical, I can chuck out or go out of this research anytime I would like. Bring us back to ethical considerations. Okay, so you see, although we try to lecture research for you, you do this step, you do this step, you do this step. You kind of need to know this and that and everything together to be able to have a sound project. That means that sometimes you propose something in your proposal, and that's exactly what is a proposal. You propose something. You may change your mind coming up to your final project. Okay. Because you see, what you propose and what you are doing currently is totally not working. Okay. So a proposal is also not cast in stone. Right. Then we get another one, which they call snowball sampling. Now, for South African students, the concept of a snowball sample is a bit difficult. You know what happens if you've got a small snowball and you run it in the snow? It becomes bigger and bigger. For me, a dung beetle, nah? What does a dung beetle do? It got a small poo, nah? That as it roll and roll and roll, it becomes bigger. So my South African version is a dung beetle sampling. Okay. So I'm trying to Africanize your syllabus, okay? And to put African concepts in here so that you understand. We rarely see snow in this country, so for us a bit of a difficult concept. Right. I'm going to give you a 5-minute break. Not. No, we're not through. We have to do documents, focus groups, and interviews still. Must I go on? Okay. You